I would like to talk about the different approaches for designing the mobile applications. And actually, I will focus on the, of course, collaboration software, because we have all heard a lot of great technology here, but often the problem is to actually deliver the technology to the user in the way that he can actually use it, not be overwhelmed. So, well, designing for mobile software is completely different from designing for desktops. What you can get away in the desktop, like for example, adding several features in half of the, let's say, project stage, well, you can do that on desktop. You can add several buttons or several menus, and you have space for that. But for example, if you want to do that the same in the mobile, well, you're actually redesigning the whole application because there is no space to do it. And well, the first reason actually why it's so different is that the user is looking at the very small picture of the whole, while on the desktop you can actually show everything. It's not the case with the mobile. The other part is the problem of your eyesight. You actually cannot look at the things that are, let's say, 1 millimeter high, like small fonts, small buttons. And even if you can see it, there's another problem with clicking that, because your fingers cannot be small as a pin. So you have to watch out for that. So as you can see, mobile software requires a lot more thought, especially in the beginning part of your projects, because once you go in, you cannot do much change there. So you have to think about it in the moment where your architecture is, where you're projecting the application. So, well, yes, but then you have to also think that, I mean, less is more in this case. Is that you shouldn't overwhelm the user with your application, that he opens it, and for example, if he sees a lot of controls, a lot of switches, a lot of buttons, and that's a problem. And that's often how let's say, your developer side is trying to do it. I mean, I'm a designer and a developer, and I know that when I think and I have an idea, I want to put all my features and all these ideas at once into the application. But often that's not the best approach. And then you have a designing team or a designer who wants to make it beautiful and just simple, but then it doesn't work anyway too, because, well, you cannot do it beautiful but in the way that it won't work. So what actually matters is the experience, and it actually is the only thing that matters. It's just you have to deliver the user an experience that he likes, no matter if it's beautiful or if it's fully featured. Because user doesn't care about your backend, in the sense that you can have an XMPP server that can handle, for example, 100,000 or 2 million users at once. But the user doesn't care as long as it works. Well, if it doesn't work, if you tell him that your server is so great that can handle 500,000, but you have, for example, 1 million users, then, well, he will switch to another service. And in the same way, the user doesn't care about the A-candy, about the beauty of your application, if the application doesn't work. So the conclusion here is that you have to try and excel in a single task and be very good at it, because this is what will drive your application to the user. So you should probably focus on the experience, on the task experience. So if, for example, your application is an instant messenger, you have to think how your application is making the messaging better than the others, and not, for example, how your application has more features or how your application has better look. I mean, this is also an effect, but you have to also look at the end and at the moment where the user is actually using your application, because that's all that matters. So let me start with covering some of the basics which are often forgotten actually, which is surprising. For example, here, you can see the application on the left, which actually from the start offers a wallpaper and colorful chat balloons and text and some opacity, but actually I have no idea what is written in the chat bubbles because I just cannot see them. So the good example is, for example, our text one, which is very clean. And actually by clean background, I don't mean one color. You can use a pattern, you can use anything which your designer delivers, but it has to be, let's say, not intrusive on the eyes. And in the same way, you can actually enlarge the font, but just barely, but it's still visible. And the mobile devices is actually pretty funny that small changes make greater impact than on the desktop. And that's another thing you have to always remember, that a lot of patterns from the desktop programming and desktop application development doesn't work here. So for example, if you compare the font sizes on Text1 and this application, they are virtually the same. But from some reason, I mean, we know what is the reason, but from some reason Text1 looks better in this case. Another actually important thing, which almost none of the applications in the App Store do, because I checked, I think 16 of them, of the most important ones, is expanding your input while typing. So it often happens that you're typing a long message and you don't see then what you type at the beginning or what you type at the end, and you should cover that. But here is also one important thing, which is often missed, is a landscape mode. So I recommend to you that whenever you use a keyboard, whenever you show the keyboard, you always should provide a landscape mode, because for me, for example, I don't have big fingers, but it's very difficult to type in the landscape, in the portrait mode, and landscape is perfect actually for that. And there is also one feature that actually I would like to recommend you to use, is the retracting of the keyboard. For example, in Text1, you can retract the keyboard using the return key if you don't have anything typed. So it hides, you can see the conversation, you can bring it up again and write. And actually, that's pretty unique. I think nobody else uses it like that. Some other applications tend to make this feature like if you click not on the keyboard but somewhere else, then it retracts. But the problem is, often in the other places there are active buttons or active actions, and then a whole mess gets going on. And another example is here with user registrations. A lot of instant messengers use user registrations, and a lot of them, most of them actually, use a built-in WebKit to display the web page for registration. And actually that's a very bad idea. Firstly, because it takes time, because even if we are on a very fast Wi-Fi, it takes several seconds to load your registration form. And often, like in this example, it doesn't just work. Like there is some error, but well, you lost a user in this case. And a good example is Nimbus here, because they are one of the few applications that have a native registration form, which is working on an API and just going back and forth, but you are still in the application and it's very fast. Or, for example, well, I again have to say about our Text1, because it has another unique idea that you don't have to register for it. The first time you start the application, an account is created for you with a random password, very hard actually, and you can edit it later. But it's actually a very cool approach, and I like it because, well, you don't require anything for the user. The user just wants to have an account, obviously. So, while I'm talking now about Text1 and other applications, so what you actually should do, you should look at others, because there's a lot of cool inventions in other applications, but they are not combined into one, actually. So, for example, because when you're using instant messaging and other collaboration software, you actually want to work with a lot of people at once. And the problem is often that you're chatting or doing something with a lot of people at once, but it's difficult to switch between them. So for example, there are two examples here of a kind of interesting idea how to handle that problem. The first one is Verbs application, but this one uses exactly the same as Safari uses the site switching. Well, you just swipe between chats in the special mode if you click a button. And another is Mevo, which actually has, I think, the best approach, and I think Skype has a similar one, is that you actually swipe between the chats like you swipe on your iPhone screen, home screen, through the pages, through the screens of applications. And that's very fast, and that's very intuitive, actually. Another problem is nowadays you actually tend to chat with a lot of people at once. So how to actually show that you're chatting with a lot of people? Well, one approach is to show their usernames in a simple list. And actually, even though it's simple, it's very effective because you can, at single glance, you can see what's going on. And another cool idea I saw is in Ping Chat is actually to have a horizontal list, which doesn't take more space, as you can see from the both screens. It doesn't take more space than a traditional list, but you can actually have it sliding horizontally. You can see everybody at once you can slide and see who is in your group chat, and you can actually see the avatars, which is really good because I believe avatars are the let's say future of your instant messaging, because people tend not to remember the names, but they remember the avatars. That's why, for example, we are trying to, in One Team for Desktop, use avatar rooster instead of just text. Okay, another thing is about collaboration. You tend to message a lot in one stream. So let's say you are sending 5 messages in a row. So the problem with most of the instant messaging applications on mobile is that they tend to duplicate the bubbles. There's one bubble, second bubble, again, and each of the bubble in this row has the same timestamp because you are sending them within 30 seconds, and the timestamp just shows minute accuracy. So you're having a lot of space taken for no reason. So what you can actually do, Skype is not a very good example here actually, because yes, they are using, it's not very visible here, but they are using a funny connection between the bubbles, but they are still duplicating the timestamp and the graphics. But what you can do actually is connect the whole conversation. Just each message in a series can be divided with a horizontal bar or something like that. And that's actually the case of One Team and Text One. Another thing which is actually more of a future thing is going to be display of the media, which you also have to think about, because, for example, you can display the media outside, but it's not very good for the reasons I will say later on. But you can display messages very neatly as a, let's say, bubble, but filled completely with the message. But that was just some of interface stuff, which probably is not very, let's say, your play, because you are more of developers. But the important stuff for thinking about the project is actually to think, when you're creating your application, to think about not the device you are deploying to, because you have to think about deploying into classes of screen sizes, not just operating systems. And why? Because when you're deploying to, for example, we can have a deploy for Android on the mobile phone and Android on Samsung Galaxy Tab. And essentially, the operating systems are the same, but the screen size is so different that you actually, if you deploy the same application from the small screen to the big one, you are wasting a lot of space, which could be used and could make a better application. So that's actually the biggest challenge now, because a lot of applications are wasting a lot of space on your mobile. And while on the desktop that's not a problem, on the mobile it is, because, well, it's a personal device. It's a device that you use quickly. You have to utilize it very, very well. So, for example, what some people are doing, here is the example of Google. They are redesigning their Android market, and they are trying algorithmic UI, which means actually that this green image is not an image in fact, but it's printed on the screen in real time, and algorithmically they calculated all these swooshes and arches, and they are drawing it every time you launch your Android market in order to make it fit perfectly on every screen. And well, it works actually, and it doesn't take many resources. It's not a big problem, and they actually have an article about that, how they did it. The only problem I have with this is, even though it's a very good idea, they have a strange execution, because if you look here, they are showing this green arch and 5 applications, and for some reason they are showing 5 applications as well here. Why would they do that? Because, why would they do that if they wanted to make such a great idea of the UI, but they are still wasting space, because the screen is so big, you can actually fit 10 applications there and have greater exposure. So that's something to think about, because that's actually the point of it all. If you, for example, can show more information at once, but still not overwhelming the user because it fits the screen, that's great. Well, another thing is to think about the vector graphics. It's still not very supported. Well, you can use SVG in WebKit, but from some reason, it's not very, let's say, distributed among the iOS developers and among actually Apple even itself. Because it would solve a lot of problems, for example, between the Retina display and the normal display. You could do your graphics just once and enlarge it on the fly, because it shouldn't take more resources, because, well, it works on Safari and it doesn't eat up your battery so much. So, well, it should work, but so far it doesn't. And another thing for the future that I want to talk about is real-time collaboration, and some ideas there how to implement that. So we have real-time. We know it's real-time editing is the hot stuff now. I mean, actually it was when Google started Google Wave, but now everybody's thinking what to do with that. Well, yes, it's very cool to edit something in real time, but, well, we should go beyond that and think about not only real-time transmission of text and data, but also of real-time experience. In the sense that, for example, here, what if you wouldn't have to, if somebody sent you, if it wasn't a picture, but a video, what if you wouldn't have to download that or go to another application to view that, or even change the screen? What if you could just tap twice, zoom your chat, play the video, tap out without the video pausing, and comment on it? That would be, very fast and quite intuitive. Then we go further. What if we could actually do real-time touching? What if we could touch anything we want, draw like on a piece of paper instead of thinking it as a screen, and collaborate with a lot of people like that? Because real-time essentially means synchronization between devices. What if you could actually synchronize between your team and quickly, without typing, without doing a lot of thinking, just express yourself and highlight and remove, reject, strike out things, and get feedback from one person to another? Because actually, when you think about collaboration, the biggest problem here is feedback between teams. You lose the most amount of time talking between people and trying to express yourself. What if you could express yourself more easily and more intuitively, as if you were in the same room with the same whiteboard, let's say? I know that, for example, when I come to Paris and we have a brainstorm in the office, it's more easy to actually do it on the whiteboard and just write anything. If I could have a design put under the whiteboard, like a screenshot, and just do something like that, it would be even better, because I would be able to express myself easier than just trying to draw it or comment on that. Well, the last actually thing I would like to address is push notifications, which is a great thing on iPhone, except that it will never work with real time. Because imagine if somebody is trying to work with you in real time and he's doing something and you're getting 100 push notifications within like 2 minutes. It's unbearable. You won't be able to do anything. You can aggregate, like your application can aggregate this, but well, it still will be a lot of messages disrupting you. So actually I like Android in this case, because it already has the notification pane, which actually can silently aggregate this if you want to actually. You can aggregate this in one place and it's not so distracting. So my message at the end is actually to think about experience, think about the real-time experience beyond real-time text editing, and think about the future of the mobile applications and how can they be easier, and try to forget about the desktop approach. Thank you. And if you have